Donald Trump has harsh words for American corporations moving operations overseas, but he may not be walking the walk. Trump's disclosure of his investments to the Federal Election Commission showing that he holds investments in companies that actually do outsource jobs overseas. Scott Martin and Guy Benson are back to weigh in. Now, Guy, I know you're not a big Trump fan, if one at all, but he has skated through these so-called crises before. Do you think he'll do it this time?
Well, hang on, David. Let me just see if I'm understanding this. Hypocrisy from Donald Trump. Let me just compose myself from the shock. No, of course Donald Trump just goes off and spouts off, and occasionally it turns out that he's being hypocritical or it's nonsense. But the premise of your question was basically, will this matter? And I suspect probably not, because he says a lot of things. No one seems to care. And when Hillary Clinton gets around to attacking him on this stuff, he'll probably pivot straight to what? Where are your Wall Street speech transcripts? What about the Clinton Foundation?
But Scott, let's pivot forward ourselves here and look at what, if he is president, if he becomes president, what happens with this policy? Because you can bash companies for moving overseas, but the main thing is what makes them do that in the first place. A lot of people say it's the disincentives that make things so expensive to be made here that they have to. What you do instead of hitting these companies is you increase the incentives for companies to work here.
Yeah, you work with them, David, and the reason they leave is because of the unfavorable business climate, where I think Trump has an advantage over, let's just say, D.C. as usual, because he can come in from the businessman side and say, hey, Mr. A company, Mr. B company, I'm going to work with you on keeping you here versus driving you out, which is what this administration has done.
Now, we have to move to a subject. We've been talking a lot about Silicon Valley with regard to Facebook, but Google is in the crosshairs. Look at this. This is the opening page of Google today. You can do it right now at home if you want. This is a front page of Google. It is paying tribute to a woman there who sympathized with terrorists and mass murders. The illustration shows Yuri Kochiyama, who Google calls a civil rights leader. But here's what she said of Osama bin Laden in October 2003. I consider Osama bin Laden as one of the people that I admire. To me, he is in the category of Malcolm X, Che Guevara, Patrice Lumumba, Fidel Castro, all leaders that I admire. Now, Scott, this is not a civil rights leader. This isn't even close. She is an apologist, or was an apologist for terrorists. What's going on?
It is almost like they didn't do their homework at Google. She is a terrorist sympathizer. David, another one of her greatest hits was calling the U.S. government an enemy of the world's people after we got terribly attacked on September 11th. She was basically making excuses for the worst terroristic disaster on American soil. It's unbelievable that she's getting any kind of attention like this. When Google has used great, cool things in the past for this login page or the landing page, she doesn't deserve it.
Well, and Guy, by the way, it wasn't just Osama bin Laden. She's been supporting terrorists like the Shining Path in Peru and others for a long time, even before the 9/11 attacks. But if Google was ignorant, we made sure they knew who she was and what she had done. And they responded that they would have no comment on this matter. Her face is still up on the website. This does nothing at all to dissuade the world from thinking that Silicon Valley is controlled by the radical left.
Well, if they were ignorant about her past, if only there were some function where they could type her name in to a bar
like a search engine. Like a search engine.
Exactly.
Could you imagine?
Maybe some things could pop up. Look, if you are praising Osama bin Laden, period, you are morally depraved and should not be celebrated in any way, shape, or form. So I don't like getting caught up in the outrage du jour, but Google should do a lot better than this.
Well, I get pretty outraged at this, Scott, particularly because, again, not only could they have Googled her themselves, but the fact is we've made them aware. They have no shame at all about this. None.
Yep.
No shame, David. And we're talking about an environment where social media and the internet is becoming a terrorist recruiter, where the U.S. government is falling behind. This is another area where the private sector needs to work with the U.S. government to keep this out of, say, the young, impressionable hands that now it's in again.
Guy, what do you think happens here? I mean, is it just going to be forgotten by the end of the week, or what?
Yeah, it'll blow over. And what Google might say is, look, this woman and her family had their civil rights and liberties egregiously violated during the internment and all of that, and she worked to try to rectify that and get reparations. And you can say, well, maybe some of that work was worthwhile, but when you cross into active support for terrorism, praising Osama bin Laden as someone that ought to be admired, you sort of forfeit any good that you may have done in the world, and certainly your worthiness to be celebrated and commemorated the way Google has chosen to do so.
Google should be ashamed. Nothing short of ashamed. I mean, we're laughing. There's funny aspects to this, but this is shameful that they would put this woman, honor this woman. By the way, today's Malcolm X's birthday as well. They could have honored him. He was a radical, but he certainly wasn't an apologist for terrorism as she was. Guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.